Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 69 in the book of John. We're going to be reading in chapter 9 today. Please read with me John chapter 9. We start in verse 5 from yesterday. Our official passage starts in verse 8. Just to remind us, Jesus is in this context where he's saying, I am the light of the world. And having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with saliva, and he anointed a man's eyes with mud. And he said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So this started with an idea that, hey, this had to have something to do with sin, right? So the disciples thought that the infirmity was either from the parents' sin or from this guy's sin. And they didn't have a worldview that sin is everywhere since the sin of Adam. So, and I suppose in that sense they were right, because the sin of Adam brought the fallenness of the world and sickness and in death. So in that sense, I think they were right. So yes, sin is quite common and fallenness is everywhere. And the idea here today is God is active in a desperate and fallen world. And can he be light? Can he influence that world? And they're so fixated on sin that they're going to accuse Jesus of being a sinner because this is done on the Sabbath. So they're committing a sin of blasphemy, saying something that's inaccurate about the one true God. They've accused God falsely, and they're sinners. So here we go, verse 8. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. So these neighbors had seen this guy before, and not only as a blind man, but also as a beggar, which made me think, hey, where are your parents and what kind of provision are they providing or not providing? So they were findable. The parents were findable. They're going to find him in tomorrow's passage. And so was the blind man. And so they're nearby somewhere, and why would you they're alive and nearby, so why would you let your son beg? What kind of parents must these guys be? And I think we're going to see tomorrow especially they're going to miss the mark of good parenting. All right, so Jesus is going to anoint this guy with mud, and he's going to be obedient. He's going to receive his sight. So verse 13. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees says, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath and of everything else. And they do have a man-made rule about making clay. They actually have 39 rules about classes of forbidden work to do. So in a sense, according to their man-made rules, again, they're right about this. So Jesus is rightly inserting himself into the Sabbath and is boldly illustrating and stating, he's saying, I am bringing sight to a man, I think the ESV note said this best, that the works of God might be displayed in him, which indicates that God in his mysterious and wise providence sometimes allows his children to go through hardship and suffering so that they can experience God's mercy and power in delivering them. So the sign here points to a big reality, which is Jesus says, I am the light of the world. I am bringing light to the world. So I'm God. I'm authoritative. I'm the one that has power. What I bring is beyond category of anything you experienced. Jesus is going to illustrate this in 7 ways in the Gospel of John. This is the second one. He said already, I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of the world. He also says I'm the door to the sheep, the good shepherd, the resurrection, the life, and the true vine. So there's 7 things he says in the context of I am. And here, I am the light of the world. I'm going to bring light to this one man, to his parents, to the officials, to the witnesses that see it. I am the light of the world, and I can shine in these bad circumstances that you do not prefer. So we have this context of suffering being a reality, which is not apart from being the Christian experience. So here's what I want to leave you with. How can we make sense of this dark world? If Christ is the light of the world, and suffering and difficulty are not unique, how do I combine the two? More specifically, how can I let Jesus be the light of the world and light of my world? And my world is marred by sin and just plain fallenness. So all sovereign suffering is seen and allowed by a caring and providential God. And the question is, will I trust God to display his light in my reality? So how do I let the reality of Jesus shine in the reality of my world, which is suffering and marred? So open my eyes to the spiritual battle of good and evil, light and dark. And when there is difficulty of circumstance, know that God has not fallen off his throne. He is still good. He is still sovereign. He is at work. And so my response to the situation is going to affect me and others as they witness me apply God to my circumstance. So where Christ may shine his light most brightly is where there is fallenness, where there's difficulty, and when there is suffering. So remember what God wants you to remember, that I am the light of the world, even and perhaps most especially in the darkness. Thanks for listening.